On June the 9th, 2025, the world witnessed the unimaginable. In the heart of the Vatican, a humble nun from a hidden monastery shattered centuries of silence with a message so powerful it moved Pope Leo XIV to tears and left the world's most influential leaders speechless. This was not just a speech, it was a spiritual earthquake, a moment that will forever change how we see faith, purpose, and the quiet strength within each of us. What you are about to hear is the truth that shook the Vatican and inspired millions across the globe. Don't blink, because this story will awaken something deep inside you, something that could change your life forever. Subscribe now and share your thoughts. Your voice matters in this historic moment. The Vatican had seen centuries of ceremony, but nothing could have prepared its marble halls for what would unfold on that June morning. Cardinals and dignitaries from across the world filled the Grand Basilica, their eyes fixed on the dais where Pope Leo XIV was expected to deliver a message of hope and unity. The air was thick with reverence and anticipation as sunlight filtered through stained glass and painted the ancient floor with shifting colors. But as the choir's final note faded, a quiet ripple moved through the crowd. A nun, dressed in the simple habit of the Benedictine order, stepped forward from the shadows. Her name was Sister Maria Lucia, and though few outside her small community in southern Italy had ever heard her speak, her presence commanded immediate attention. She walked with steady purpose, her gaze unwavering, and paused before the Holy Father. The silence was absolute. Pope Leo XIV, known for his eloquence and compassion, welcomed her with a gentle nod. He had met thousands of faithful in his years as pontiff, but there was something different in Sister Maria Lucia's eyes, a depth of conviction and peace that seemed to radiate from her very soul. She bowed respectfully, then lifted her head to address not only the Pope, but the world. Her voice, though soft, carried through the basilica with clarity and strength. She began not with formalities, but with a story, a memory from her childhood during a time of hardship and war. She spoke of fear and hunger of loss and the quiet courage of her mother, who had taught her to pray for those who hurt her rather than curse them. The crowd listened transfixed as Sister Maria Lucia described how faith had been her only light in the darkest nights. She spoke of the forgotten, the poor, the refugees who wandered Europe's roads, and the children who knew hunger better than hope. She did not speak in abstractions, but in vivid detail. Faces remembered, hands held prayers, whispered in bombed-out churches. Her words painted a picture of suffering, but also of resilience and a love that refused to die. Then her message shifted. Sister Maria Lucia turned to the Pope and the assembled leaders, her voice rising with quiet urgency. She spoke of the Church's mission not as an institution of power, but as a living witness to Christ's compassion. She challenged them to remember the simplicity of the gospel, to serve not only with words, but with actions that risk comfort for the sake of justice and mercy. Her words echoed through the basilica. We are called not to rule, but to wash feet, not to judge, but to heal, not to seek glory, but to lift up the brokenhearted. The audience, accustomed to polished speeches, sat in stunned silence. Some wept openly. Others bowed their heads, moved by a truth that pierced through centuries of tradition. Pope Leo XIV, for the first time in his papacy, was visibly shaken. He listened intently, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Sister Maria Lucia spoke of forgiveness not only for others, but for the Church itself. She acknowledged the pain of those who had been wounded by the failures of leaders, and she called for humility, repentance, and a new beginning rooted in love. She ended her message not with a demand, but with a prayer. She knelt before the altar, inviting all present to join her in a moment of silence for the world's suffering and for the courage to become instruments of peace. The basilica, usually filled with ritual and song, was now united in a silence so deep it felt sacred. When Sister Maria Lucia rose, she did not linger. She bowed once more to the Pope and quietly returned to her seat. The impact of her words lingered in the air, heavy and electric. Pope Leo XIV remained motionless, his hands clasped in prayer as the world watched and waited for his response. Outside the basilica, news of the nuns' message spread like wildfire. Journalists scrambled to capture the moment, and social media erupted with speculation and admiration. Many wondered what would come next, how the Vatican and indeed the world would respond to a message that had cut through centuries of hierarchy and ritual to reach the very heart of faith. But inside the Vatican, it was clear that something extraordinary had happened. For the first time in living memory, the leader of the Catholic Church had been rendered speechless not by scandal or crisis, but by the courage and truth of a single humble nun. As the congregation slowly dispersed from the basilica, a hushed reverence lingered in the air. Cardinals and bishops, normally quick to resume their duties, found themselves pausing in the aisles, quietly discussing the nun's words. Many felt as if they had witnessed a moment of divine intervention, a message that was both a mirror and a call to action. The Vatican's corridors, usually abuzz with protocol, now echoed with thoughtful silence. Pope Leo XIV remained in the sanctuary long after most had left. He sat in quiet contemplation, his mind replaying every word Sister Maria Lucia had spoken. For a man who had spent his life navigating the complexities of faith and leadership, her message was both a challenge and a comfort. He recognized in her testimony the raw honesty that so often eluded the polished language of official statements. She had spoken from the margins, yet her voice had reached the center of power. That evening, the Pope called a private meeting with his closest advisors. The atmosphere was solemn as he recounted the nun's message, emphasizing her call for humility, repentance, and a return to the Gospel's core. He asked each advisor what they had felt in that moment, urging them to speak from the heart rather than from policy or tradition. Some admitted to feeling uncomfortable, even convicted. Others expressed gratitude for the reminder of the Church's true mission. The conversation soon turned to action. Pope Leo XIV wondered aloud how the Church could respond not with mere words, but with concrete steps. He proposed a season of reflection and service, a time when Church leaders would step away from ceremonial roles and immerse themselves in the lives of the poor, the sick, and the forgotten. He envisioned bishops visiting shelters, cardinals serving in soup kitchens, and priests listening to the confessions of those who had long felt abandoned by the institution. News of the Pope's response began to filter out, and the world took notice. Media outlets reported that the Vatican was preparing for an unprecedented period of humility and outreach. Faithful around the globe were inspired by the possibility of real change. In parishes from Manila to Mexico City, priests read excerpts from Sister Maria Lucia's message during Mass, urging their congregations to reflect on what it meant to serve with true compassion. Meanwhile, Sister Maria Lucia returned to her quiet life at the Benedictine monastery. She declined interviews and requests for public appearances, choosing instead to remain in prayer and service with her community. Yet letters and messages poured in from every continent, words of gratitude, confessions of pain, and pleas for guidance. She responded to as many as she could, offering encouragement and prayers, always redirecting attention to Christ rather than herself. Back in Rome, the Vatican began to organize new initiatives inspired by the nun's message. A commission was formed to review the Church's approach to social justice, with a mandate to listen to those most affected by poverty and exclusion. The Pope called for a global day of prayer and fasting, inviting Catholics and people of all faiths to join in solidarity with the suffering. The impact of Sister Maria Lucia's message was felt far beyond the walls of the Vatican. Religious leaders from other faiths reached out, expressing admiration for her courage and echoing her call for humility and service. Humanitarian organizations reported a surge in volunteers, many citing the nun's words as their inspiration. Social media campaigns sprang up, encouraging people to perform acts of kindness in her honor. As weeks passed, the Church's renewed focus on humility began to bear fruit. Stories emerged of bishops quietly visiting hospitals, priests walking alongside refugees, and nuns organizing food drives in impoverished neighborhoods. These acts, though small in the grand scheme, signaled a shift, a Church willing to listen, to learn, and to change. Pope Leo XIV, deeply moved by the transformation, decided to address the world. In a televised message, he spoke candidly about his own sense of awe and gratitude for Sister Maria Lucia's courage. He acknowledged the Church's failures and asked forgiveness from those who had been hurt. He reaffirmed the commitment to serve, to heal, and to walk humbly with all people, regardless of status or creed. His words, broadcast to millions, echoed the nuns' message. We are called to love without condition, to serve without seeking reward, and to forgive as we have been forgiven. Let us begin again together. The world watched as the Vatican, often seen as unchanging, opened itself to renewal. And at the heart of it all was the memory of a nun's simple, powerful truth, a truth that had stunned a pope and awakened a global faith. As the months unfolded, the Vatican's transformation became evident not just in public statements, but in the daily actions of its leaders and faithful. The world watched with cautious optimism as centuries-old traditions gave way to a new spirit of openness and humility. The story of Sister Maria Lucia's message continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the walls of Rome. In parishes across continents, priests and lay people alike began to re-examine their roles. Many found themselves inspired to step outside their comfort zones, volunteering in shelters, visiting prisoners, and reaching out to those who felt abandoned by society. The Church's renewed commitment to service was not always easy. There were moments of resistance, discomfort, and even criticism from those who feared change. Yet the example set by the nuns' courage and the Pope's willingness to listen gave others permission to act with greater compassion and authenticity. Sister Maria Lucia herself remained largely out of the public eye, but her influence only grew. Stories circulated of her quiet acts of kindness, comforting the dying, teaching children to read, and spending hours in prayer for strangers she would never meet. Her humility became a model for all who sought to serve without recognition. For many, she embodied the very heart of the gospel, a life poured out for others marked by gentleness and unwavering faith. The Vatican's Commission on Social Justice began to release its first findings. Reports highlighted the voices of the poor, the marginalized and the wounded voices that had too often been ignored. Recommendations included practical steps, redirecting resources toward communities in need, establishing listening sessions in every diocese, and creating new pathways for lay leadership within the Church. The Pope endorsed these measures, emphasizing that true renewal must begin with listening and repentance. Media coverage remained intense. Documentaries explored the impact of the nuns' message, and interviews with those affected revealed a deep hunger for authenticity and hope. Commentators noted that for perhaps the first time in decades, the Church was being defined not by scandal or division, but by a sincere effort to heal and unite. The world's attention was fixed on Rome, waiting to see if these changes would endure. In the midst of this transformation, Pope Leo XIV made a pilgrimage to a refugee camp on the outskirts of Europe. Accompanied by only a few aides, he spent hours listening to the stories of families displaced by war and poverty. He knelt beside children, prayed with mothers, and shared meals with elders who had lost everything. The images of the Pope, once seen only in grand cathedrals, now showed him walking dusty roads and embracing the forgotten. His actions spoke as powerfully as any sermon. The Pope's journey was broadcast live, and millions watched as he addressed the world from a makeshift altar. He spoke of the sacredness of every human life, the call to welcome the stranger, and the need for courage in the face of suffering. He thanked Sister Maria Lucia by name, crediting her message with awakening his own conscience and guiding the Church toward a new path. Back at the monastery, Sister Maria Lucia watched the broadcast in silence, her hands folded in prayer. She felt no pride, only gratitude that her words had been used for good. In her heart, she prayed that the movement would continue not just in Rome, but in every corner of the world where hope was needed most. As autumn approached, the Church's efforts began to bear fruit. Parishes reported increased attendance not just at Mass, but at service projects and community gatherings. Young people, once disillusioned, returned with new energy and purpose. The Church's renewed focus on humility and service resonated with a generation searching for meaning. The world had witnessed a miracle not of spectacle, but of transformation. And at the center of it all was the memory of a nun's message that had stunned a pope and inspired a global awakening. As winter settled over Rome, the world continued to watch the Vatican with a sense of awe and renewed hope. The changes sparked by Sister Maria Lucia's message had begun to reshape not only the Church's public image, but also its internal culture. Cardinals who once guarded tradition with rigid formality now found themselves in open dialogue with parishioners, listening to stories of struggle and resilience. Bishops traveled to remote villages and urban slums, seeking to understand firsthand the needs of those they served. Pope Leo XIV, deeply transformed by the nuns' words, made it a priority to foster humility at every level of leadership. He instituted regular days of service for Vatican officials, insisting that no one was above the call to serve the least among them. The sight of high-ranking clergy working alongside volunteers in soup kitchens and clinics became a powerful symbol of the new era. These acts were not for show, they were carried out quietly, often without cameras or press, in the spirit of authentic compassion. The impact of this cultural shift was felt far beyond the walls of the Vatican. Other faith communities and secular organizations took notice, launching their own initiatives to bridge divides and uplift the vulnerable. The spirit of humility and service became contagious, inspiring countless individuals to reach out to neighbors in need, to forgive old grievances and to seek reconciliation in their own lives. Sister Maria Lucia's influence continued to grow, though she remained steadfast in her commitment to a life of prayer and simplicity. Her letters, filled with encouragement and wisdom, circulated among those longing for guidance. She reminded everyone that true change does not begin in grand gestures, but in the quiet, often unseen choices made each day, the decision to listen, to forgive, to act with kindness. The media, initially skeptical of the Vatican's transformation, began to report on the tangible results. Stories emerged of parishes revitalized by acts of service, of families reunited through forgiveness, and of communities once divided now working together for the common good. Documentaries chronicled the journeys of individuals who had been inspired by the nuns' message: teachers, nurses, laborers, and students, each finding new purpose in serving others. As Christmas approached, Pope Leo XIV delivered a message unlike any before. Standing in St. Peter's Square, he spoke not from a place of authority, but as a fellow pilgrim on the journey of faith. He acknowledged the pain and failures of the past, but also celebrated the hope that had been rekindled. He called on all people, regardless of faith or background, to join in a movement of compassion and humility. His words resonated around the globe. In cities and villages, people gathered to share meals with the lonely, to visit the sick, and to offer shelter to the homeless. The Church's renewed spirit of service became a beacon, lighting the way through the darkness of winter and into the promise of a new year. Through it all, Sister Maria Lucia remained a quiet presence, her life a testament to the power of humility and truth. She continued to pray for the Church, for the world, and for every person longing for hope. Her message, once spoken in a single moment of courage, now lived on in the hearts and actions of millions. As the new year dawned, the legacy of Sister Maria Lucia's message had become woven into the very fabric of the Church and the wider world. What began as a single moment of truth in the Vatican had grown into a movement that transcended borders, denominations, and generations. The spirit of humility and service she inspired continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen. In communities across the globe, people found new meaning in ordinary acts of kindness. Parishioners organized food drives, students volunteered in hospitals, and neighbors cared for one another with renewed compassion. The Church's renewed commitment to listening and serving brought hope to the marginalized and dignity to the forgotten. Stories of reconciliation and healing became common as families reunited and old wounds were mended in the light of forgiveness. Pope Leo XIV, forever changed by the encounter with Sister Maria Lucia, continued to lead with humility. He traveled to places once overlooked by the Church, remote villages, refugee camps, and prisons, bringing a message of hope and solidarity. His words and actions inspired leaders of other faiths and governments to re-examine their own priorities, sparking a global conversation about the true meaning of leadership and service. Sister Maria Lucia's name became synonymous with quiet courage. Though she remained in her monastery, her influence was felt everywhere. Her letters were read in churches, schools, and homes, offering wisdom and encouragement to those seeking a path of purpose. She became a symbol of the power of one voice spoken in truth and love to change the course of history. The media chronicled the ongoing transformation not as a fleeting trend, but as a deep and lasting shift in values. Documentaries and books told the stories of lives changed by the nuns' message, stories of former adversaries working side by side, of young people finding hope in service, and of elders discovering new purpose in their later years. As the anniversary of that unforgettable day approached, the Vatican prepared a simple ceremony to honor Sister Maria Lucia and all those who had embraced her call to humility and compassion. People from every continent sent messages of gratitude, sharing how her words had inspired them to see the world and themselves differently. On the day of the ceremony, Pope Leo XIV addressed the world from the same basilica where it all began. His voice was steady, his message clear. Let us never forget that the greatest power lies not in titles or thrones, but in the courage to speak the truth, the humility to listen, and the willingness to serve. Sister Maria Lucia reminded us that faith is not a fortress but a bridge. May her example guide us always. As the bells of St. Peter's rang out, a sense of peace settled over the city. Those who had gathered, cardinals, nuns, pilgrims, and ordinary people, joined in silent prayer, united by a hope that transcended words. The world, still full of challenges and uncertainties, now carried within it a seed of transformation. The story of the nun who stunned the Pope was no longer just a headline or a memory. It had become a living testament to the power of humility, truth, and love, a reminder that even in the quietest voices, there lies the strength to move the world.